Hey there, and welcome to a new episode of the Dietitian Success Podcast, the business and entrepreneurship podcast specifically created for registered dietitians. My name is Krista Kolajesic. I am the host. I'm also the founder of Dietitian Success Center. So every week I like to come on here and I like to talk about what it actually looks like to run a business full-time as a dietitian entrepreneur. I love talking about business. I love sharing, what we do, what has worked, what hasn't worked for us when it comes to growth, when it comes to marketing. And I love to share it in a way that allows you to be able to bring it back to your own business, regardless of what type of business you run, whether it's private practice, you have online courses, you do consulting, freelancing, doesn't really matter. And so if you're new to us and if you haven't heard of Dietitian Success Center, we are a practice and resource library that's specifically designed for registered dietitians. So if you haven't already, make sure and join our free dietitian starter kit, because as a part of that starter kit, you will be able to see everything that we offer. You also get a bunch of free handouts, so client handouts. You get a motivational interviewing cheat sheet, you get a PES statement cheat sheet, and then you also get access to our free dietitian community, which we actually just started about a month and a half ago, and we're already at over 1,000 dietitians. And I think that just goes to show how much dietitians want to connect with each other, and want that community space that's specifically designed for them. So make sure and join our free dietitian community. So just go to the link in the description of this episode. The starter kit, the DSC starter kit, is how you get access to the community. And so the other thing that we've started doing recently is in the community, I've actually started to live stream these podcast episodes to give dietitians more than one chance or way to listen to the content. So some people prefer to watch a video, some people prefer to listen to the actual podcast recording. And it's also a cool opportunity too, when I live stream in the community, to be able to answer questions as they come up too from viewers. So if you are joining us live, please make sure to keep your camera off and your microphone muted. If you have any questions, please post your questions in the chat. I will address them at the end or throughout as it fits within the podcast outline. And if it's something that's unrelated, we can totally answer those questions in the community forum after this recording. So the live stream always happens on Tuesdays, and then the podcast episode is published on Thursdays to all of our podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcast. And so that is my starting spiel. Today, I want to talk a little bit about hiring. I want to talk about hiring. And this has been a topic that I haven't really covered much in the past, but I think it is a really, really, really important topic. And it is an underutilized topic, or it is an underutilized strategy. I will call it a strategy. It's an underutilized strategy within the dietetics world, because I think that there's a lot of false beliefs that exist when it comes to hiring. There is sort of this idea of like, oh my gosh, my business needs to be making a certain revenue amount every year in order for me to be able to afford to hire someone. I'm too scared to hire someone because I don't really think I can be a leader. I have no idea what I would even hire for. That feels completely unattainable. Don't I have to be a really big business in order to hire someone? And generally, for the most part, these things are untrue. And I like to present a different perspective on hiring that's really based on my own personal journey, personal experience, and what I have seen work for dietitians as well. So we'll talk a little bit about hiring today. And we're going to talk about this concept of hiring for growth versus hiring because of growth. So we're sort of going to flip the narrative when it comes to this conversation around hiring, and how do we actually use hiring as a way to be able to grow in our business, as opposed to the result of having reached a certain growth point or a certain revenue number every year. Now, this is going to be sort of a high level introduction because we are actually going to be doing a 2-part kind of intensive series within the business side of Dietitian Success Center membership. We are going to be doing so every week. I do a live workshop on a different topic every Thursday or Friday, just depending on the week. I do a live workshop that is more of an in-depth training on this topic. So in a few weeks' time in April, actually, I'm going to be doing a 2-part series where part 1, we're going to be talking about how to decide which position you need to hire for. And then part 2 is going to be a step-by-step guide to hiring and what that actually looks like when you break it down step by step. So how do you go from no person on your team to a person on your team? And so that's going to be coming in April. If you are one of our business members currently, you will get access to all of that. If you are not currently, then make sure and join us, reach out, and we will send you instructions for how to join the business side of the membership. And so that's going to be really great. So this is going to be kind of a higher level overview, but I promise it will give you a lot of food for thought when it comes to, and I hope it will change your perspective a little bit on this whole idea of hiring. So I want to actually take it back before I get into the strategy here. And I want to talk a little bit about my own experience and how this idea has been informed by my own experience. So starting off, when I started Dietitian Success Center, there were so many jobs that needed to get done in order to get this thing to a place of being able to launch it. So there was the actual website development, so creating and designing the website. There was getting all the content that we needed inside of the membership, and in order to ensure that when people joined, they actually had stuff available to them. This was pre-Olivia. So now Olivia is our content manager within Dietitian Success Center. So she does all that stuff, but this was pre-Olivia. So I was really just doing this on my own at the very beginning. I was running the podcast at the time. I was talking about business and entrepreneurship at the time. So I wanted to make sure and keep the podcast going so that I could talk about what we were creating and what we were building. There was the whole like marketing and sales piece of this big project. So, how were we even going to, or how was I even going to get new members to join? How was I going to keep members every single month? Like, what did that whole member acquisition, sales, and marketing strategy look like? There was just so much happening. There were just all the logistics. And then never mind, I was still running a freelancing and consulting dietitian business on the side. So I was still trying to manage my current freelancing clients. So still doing like writing projects, freelance projects, consulting projects, etc. So that was also still happening. So it's sort of like running 2 businesses at once. And so when I really thought to myself, well, okay, so what is the thing that I need to be spending the most amount of my time on? It becomes quite clear to you that, well, unless you are marketing your business does not grow, right? Unless you are spending your time marketing and you're ensuring that you're spreading the word about what you do, well, then your business can just stay very stagnant or not even get off the ground. So for example, like if I got so hung up on the logistics of like creating the website, creating the content for the nutrition library, all of those like logistics things, and I ignored the marketing piece, well, then when I went to launch, this was going to be a complete flop because I didn't spend any time building up that audience of people and actually being intentional about that sales and marketing strategy. And so there was this moment of like, okay, well, I need to make sure I'm spending my time in that area because it is so important. So then if I need to make sure I'm spending my time in that area, then who can take these other things off my plate? And especially because the more time I'm spending in that area, I can really make the reasonable assumption that the more members we will get, right? The more I market the membership, the more members we will get. That is just, right? Like that just intuitively makes sense. And so I had to make the decision then to outsource the website development. So I outsourced the design and the development. I think at the time in the our version one of our website, I think I outsourced it for around $3,000. And so there was that piece, I outsourced that piece. And then I also recognized too that, okay, well, if we're going to have really great content within the membership, that content should not be created by me. I am not a dietitian who is an expert in all the things. We need to make sure that I needed to make sure I was hiring people who had specific subject matter expertise in specific topics so that we could create excellent content. So that was then the other piece that I hired out. And again, this was pre-Olivia. So this was back when I would just work with dietitians as like one-off contractors to help us create content. Now our content is all created in-house, but we'll talk about that later. And so that was another big piece that I was able to get off of my plate, and somebody else was able to take that on so that, again, I could spend my time in that space of marketing the membership and really thinking about what is that strategy going to be in order to get new members. So that was really the starting point of my hiring journey, was more so related to contractors. So hiring contractors, there is a difference between hiring contractors and hiring employees from a legal perspective. I won't speak to all the ins and outs of that or all the details of that, but generally contractors are hired for like one-off projects or very specific projects with start and end dates. Whereas employees are people that are more consistently actually hired by your business. And so, so that's how this journey started. And then after a few months, it became clear that I needed to, in order to keep the membership going, I needed to continue building out the library of content that we had available to us. But then again, I then also looked at my own skill set, and I looked at my own limitations, and I looked at the fact that, oh, yeah, right, I need to continue to spend my time in the marketing space. So then, but we no longer had these like contractors who we worked with at the very beginning, working with me. And so Olivia was actually one of those early contractors that I had worked with. She helped us with the baby-led weaning content. And so then we had such an amazing time working together. I absolutely loved her. I knew Olivia from a previous job that we both had. And so then brought Olivia into the business, started at only a few hours a week to help us start bringing in some of that contract work in-house. And in order to have somebody that was a little bit more consistently with the business, so that I also wasn't having to like retrain new people every time we wanted a new piece of content created. So there was a lot of efficiencies there as well. But I think what's the important piece here is that even with Olivia, when it started off very small, only a few hours a week. I can't remember exactly how many hours, but started off very small. And progressively over time has grown as the business has grown, and then has slowly transitioned from contract work into employee. And then Maria is the operations manager within Dietitian Success Center. And that process was fairly similar in that she started small. So started with, a few hours a week. Again, I can't remember exactly what that looked like, but started with a few hours a week in the business. And then it slowly grew over time as the business grew. And really the biggest reason there for her role changing and transitioning was, the realization for me when I had a baby, and this may relate to a lot of people that are listening to this that are thinking about perhaps wanting to plan a maternity leave or know that they have a life event coming up, which is going to, take them out of their business and it's not going to allow you to run your business in the same way as you were doing it before. Well, sort of this recognition of like, oh, in the time I do have available to dedicate to my business, knowing I also have a baby, in the time I do have available to dedicate to my business, I can't be doing the like day-to-day stuff anymore. I can't be doing the customer service, the email, scheduling out emails, the website updates, those sorts of things that end up filling up a lot of your time, but they also prevent you from marketing. And marketing, again, is the thing that grows the business. And so if you're not spending time in the marketing space, well, then the business doesn't grow. So it was sort of this realization of like, okay, well, if I want the business to grow, I need to ensure that the time I do have available to me is spent in the marketing space. And so therefore the decision was made to outsource some of those day-to-day things to Maria, operations manager. So as you can see from this story, it's sort of this whole idea that the cart has always come before the horse, meaning hiring was always the thing that got me from A to B. It was always the thing that allowed me to be able to stay in the marketing zone when there's so many different things that are pulling at you in a business. There's so many different tasks that need attention and need to be done, but that are not necessarily revenue generating or not necessarily helping you actually grow. And so what I see a lot with dietitians is the, RD who is running a business and they want to grow, but they're not currently doing the tasks that are going to actually allow them to grow. This is usually due to a time constraint. You're busy working in the day-to-day, very real for dietitians that have 9-to-5 jobs and are, have this side hustle going on outside of their 9-to-5 job. And they're trying to grow it to a place where it could be a full-time thing. But they're so bogged down in the seeing clients, doing contract work, billing, invoicing, booking, admin, follow-ups, creating Canva graphics, that they're not actually doing the things that are going to create that growth. And one of my favorite quotes in business is that nothing changes if nothing changes. Your business is not just magically going to grow unless you actually spend the time on growth generating activities, i.e. marketing, right? Things like getting out there in your community, building relationships, making content, getting people to refer people to you, creating a more scalable offer, emailing your email list, growing your email list. How many of you are listening to this and have ghosted your email list over the past few months because you have not had the time to email them? So then the question then becomes, okay, well then how do you unlock more time? How do you unlock the space and the capacity to be able to do these things that are going to grow your business? Well, you can unlock more time by transferring some of those tasks to someone else so that you can spend your time growing the business. And that is your job, by the way, as the owner. Nobody is going to do that for you. You are responsible for the growth of the business. Now, if you're listening to this and you're thinking to yourself, well, Krista, I don't really want to grow my business. I'm happy with how things are right now. Okay, great. That's totally fine. If you are just happy to remain as you are and just keep things super simple, that is totally, totally fine. There is never any sort of requirement to, or I always embrace the notion that there are 1,001 different ways to run a successful business. And it really comes down to what does success mean for you and what does success look like for you? And so that's completely fine. But, I do think if that is your goal, if growth is your goal and you are not doing those growth generating tasks at this moment in time, well, then it can be an opportunity for you to, ask yourself, okay, well, what if I were able to give all of these little tasks that I do every single week and give them to someone else so that I could take those extra. And by the way, when we're thinking, I know I've had this struggle myself, this kind of mental debate with myself of like, oh yeah, but scheduling that email only takes a few minutes, or making that website update only takes a few minutes. Let me tell you though, those minutes add up and they take up mental space. They add up. They don't just take you 10 minutes, 5 or 10 minutes. And so, what if you were to take all of those little tasks and give them to someone else and use that extra 2 to 3 hours every week to actually market your business and get even more clients or more members or more customers? Whoa, that would be pretty awesome. That is how the business grows. So let's think about this from a numbers perspective so we can make it make sense in our heads. So let's say that you charge $150 for a 60-minute one-on-one session with a client. Let's say that you hire a virtual assistant that you pay, let's just say $30 per hour. So let's say you hire a virtual assistant, you pay them $30 an hour, and you start them off at 3 hours a week. So ultimately you pay $90 a week for that virtual assistant. Now, what if you were able to use those 3 hours, if you took those 3 hours every week and you looked at where all of your past customers or clients found you, because that's the marketing that is working for you. So if you looked at that data and you started doing more of that, and let's say with those 3 hours every week, you started doing more of that and you were able to generate 2 new clients at $150 an hour, well, that means you just made $300 and you only paid $90, right? So you got a very positive return on that investment. That is growth. That is how the business grows. The math is very much mathing there, right? We paid $90, but we got $300 in return with that time. So then I often get asked the question too, well, okay, what's the right type of hire? And we're going to talk about that more in the live workshop that we do for business members. But, generally dietitians, depending on their business, will start with one of two types of hires. We have the virtual assistant. The virtual assistant is essentially the person who kind of does all the day-to-day. A virtual assistant role is a very broad role. They can do things like any of the admin stuff that you have. They can create graphics on Canva for you. They can schedule emails for you. There's so many different roles that a VA can do. Or dietitians will often hire a contractor dietitian to actually take on some of their one-on-one client load. Now, the decision between VA or contractor dietitian it's really based on a number of different factors, but I think most importantly, you have to ask yourself, what do you need from your business and the type of work that you're doing? So a virtual assistant is really great for helping you get some of those non-revenue generating tasks off of your plate, those things that are not actually helping you grow the business, but they are bogging you down. Whereas a contractor dietitian can be a really good option if you are looking to take some of that client load off of your shoulders, if you are hoping to be able to take a bit more time off in the future. So I know that's a big challenge for a lot of dietitians that are running these service-based businesses, is that if you are not there, you are not making money, right? Whereas if you have a contractor, you can be not there and you can still be making money. You can still be having clients coming into your business, which is really cool. So if you're planning a maternity leave, for example, you don't have to just stop your business. you could hire someone who could take on those patients for you while you take time off from your business. So I know, that can be a very like exhale moment for a lot of dietitians where they're like, oh my gosh, I feel like it's not all on my shoulders anymore. So there's a few different ways to kind of approach that idea of who is the right hire, but ultimately what we're trying to do here is we're trying to ensure that you stay within the zone of you really stay within your marketing zone, right? The zone of like, okay, what do I do that is going to actually contribute to growing the business? Um and so, there's often this fear too of like, oh, but I can't afford that. And so, what I like to say to this is like, hiring does not have to mean you hire someone part time or full time or even 5 hours a week. You could start so small and at a place that feels really comfortable for you. Even finding a virtual assistant that can do 1 hour per week for you. I think what you're going to find is once you start with 1 hour, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe how much stuff I've been able to get off my plate, and hand off to someone else, that you'll probably start increasing that quite quickly. But then also too, I think what you will realize through this process is that, like, I know myself well enough at this point to know that, like, if something needs to be done consistently in the business, it is better to hand it off to someone else because there's a lot of different things pulling my attention as somebody who, owns the business and has to think about these like higher level, bigger strategy decisions that often take a lot of mental space and a lot of mental capacity. That, like, for example, I feel like, you will feel so great when you have someone that can also help to keep you accountable to some of these things that you need to do consistently. So, for example, if you've set a goal to email your list out, or sorry, to email your email list twice a month, let's say every 2 weeks, and you haven't been doing it because that's been the last thing on your priority list, suddenly when you outsource that to someone else, it will get done because you are paying them to do it. Right. And so if it doesn't get done, well, then they're not going to have a job anymore. And so you are paying them to do it. And so it will get done. And so it also feels really great too, as a business owner, to start seeing some of these things actually happen consistently that you've been wanting to do consistently for a long time, but you just haven't been able to for whatever reason. So, back to the fear that you can't afford it, it's starting super small. So it could just be like 1 hour per week. And then what you're going to do is you're going to look at where, and this is how you're going to be able to ensure that you get a return on that investment, is you're going to look at where all of your former customers, clients, members have found you. And this will tell you which of your current marketing channels is working. And then what you're going to do is you're going to use that 1 hour per week that you get back, and you're going to do more of the thing that's working, more of that marketing thing that's working. So if you know that you're getting a lot of really great leads from psychotherapists in your area, so if they're referring patients to your eating disorders practice regularly, and you're getting, that's been a really fruitful source for you. Okay, well then expand that. How many more psychotherapists can you reach out to? Because if we know that the one thing is working, then it really makes sense that if we do more of that thing, it will keep working and it will work more, right? And so this can grow, and then the role can grow progressively over time. The more time you spend in that space, that marketing space, that growth space. Okay, so that was that is pretty much what I want to talk about at this point when it comes to hiring. I would love to, as per usual, I always love to hear your questions. Feel free to post them in the community if you are in our free dietitian community. If you haven't joined our free community yet, head on over to Dietitian Success Center and then .com, and then on the homepage there's a button to join our free DSC starter kit. And once you join that, you get access to our free dietitian community. So you can always ask these questions in the community. I also do free 20-minute business strategy calls with registered dietitians. I started doing that this month and I am obsessed with them. I think I've probably done maybe 15 or so far, and they are so much fun. It's such a great opportunity for me to be able to help dietitians get unstuck and really learn more about some of those challenges that dietitians are experiencing at the start, grow, or scale phases of business. So if you haven't booked yours, make sure and do so. There will be a link to book your free business strategy call in the description of this episode. All right. So with that, thank you so much for listening to this episode of the podcast. It was so nice to chat with you, as I do every Tuesday or Thursday, depending on when you're listening to this. Have an awesome week. Thank you for joining us, and I will see you next Tuesday or Thursday.